I'm very happy to be here and to have the opportunity to present you this project. So it's a quite old project. We started to work on this with Juan and Ricardo quite a few years ago, but it has become very accurate for me in the past year. So the papers changed quite a lot. It has changed substantially, so it's now very much work in progress. And I mean, all your comments are more than welcome on this project. So the idea would be to looking at family policies and parents' well-being. So, okay, why it's not working when I try to? Yeah. So let's start with a few motivations. So the first stylized fact I want to remember you is from this paper by Cleven and co-authors, where they looked at the evolution of earnings for men and women before and after the birth of the first child. Okay, and you see that for men, the evolution in terms of earning is quite flat. So nothing really happens before and after the birth of the first child. While for women, if they have earnings that are close to men before the birth of the first child, there is a clear drop in terms of earnings after the birth. And it's remained lower up to 10 years after the birth of the first child. Okay, so it seems that childbirth is very detrimental for women's earnings. Now, it seems that it's also quite detrimental for their well-being, actually. If you look at this paper by Marianne Bertrand that has been published in 2013, where she looks at the well-being of college-educated women, she compares the well-being of women who has family, so who has children, with women who has what she calls a career. So career is when you have an earnings that is above the 25th percentile of the distribution, okay? And what you can see is that if you compare these four types of women that have a career are happier than women that do not have a career. So it seems that there is a well-being premium for having a career. If you compare women that do have a family with women that do not have a family, it seems that you have a well-being premium for having a family. But it seems that women who have both a career and a family are not able to somehow add up the premium in terms of well-being. They are not happier when they have both a family and a career. So it seems that somehow women struggle to have both. Okay. So based on this, we know that a lot of educated women decide to not to marry or to not have children in order to have a career, or at least they have fewer children. This is in another, for instance, in country like Japan, this is a problem, but also in other countries like in Germany, for instance, the country I will talk about. And so the question is, what can we do for women to allow them to have a career and a family and to be happy? And so, of course, there have been a lot of family policies in the last 50 years that have tried to help women to have both things, a career and family. So in terms of family policies, there have been parental leave and maternity leave that have increased quite a lot in different countries, and also childcare facilities that have been implemented and extended in different countries. So it helps women mainly in two ways. So first, maternity leave, for instance, it's offer financial support just after childbirth to allow them to still have some income when women take care of the child. But it's also allow them to, if you have short paternity leave, or parental leave, sorry, or maternity leave, it kind of increase the incentives for women to go back to work earlier. And if in addition you have childcare facilities, of course it allows women to work and to have kids. So basically it seems quite intuitive that this type of policy should help women to be happy when they work and have kids. So it should increase mothers' well-being. But surprisingly, there have been very few papers in the literature that have looked at the effect of these family policies on well-being. So most of the literature on these family policies looked at mother labor market outcomes. So whether mothers get back to work after or more likely to work when you have this type of policy that are implemented in the country, the impact in terms of mother earnings or gender gaps in terms of income. But I found very few studies that have looked at the impact on mother life satisfaction. So for instance, for maternity leave, I found 3 papers looking at the effect of maternity leave on mother life satisfaction. Pezzini, that is a paper that is looking at cross-country evidence, just looking at different policies implemented in different countries and looked at the relationship with life satisfaction, and 2 other papers that are not published and which looked at longitudinal evidence using for Dadio et al. The BHPS and the German data, and for Dielenzinger, I don't know how to pronounce it, using data from the Netherlands. But both of so these 2 papers only looked at the short-term effect, like whether when women are on maternity leave, whether they are happy or not. Okay. There are other papers that have looked at the effect on mother depression. So, but basically, when you look at this literature, they find either non-significant effect or small positive effects on women, but again, very on the short-term effect. Now, for the effect of childcare policies on life satisfaction, I know one paper by Abel Broder and Marie Connolly where they looked at an increase in terms of childcare facilities in Quebec, and they basically found a small negative effect on life satisfaction, which can be quite surprising. And so they find that you actually have a positive effect for low educated parents and a small negative effect for high educated parents. So here, what will be the contribution? First, we will look at mother life satisfaction. So we will in particular look at short-term effect, but also more long-term effects. So up to 10 years after the birth of the child. So not only when women are on maternity leave, but also whether when they later when they go back to work, for instance, or after a few years, whether they are also happier because they had the opportunity to go back to work, for instance, thanks to these family policies. And we will also look at whether there are any different effects depending on the level of education or the level of earnings of the mother. Another contribution of this paper will be to look at both family policies in the same setting, meaning that most of the literature so far, I mean, in terms of well-being, but also the literature that looks at mother labor supply or mother earnings, usually they looked at this policy in isolation, meaning either looking at the effect of parental leave or either looking at the effect of childcare. But actually, if you think about it, there could be some complementarities or cross effects between the two. So for instance, I think the effect of parental leave on mother outcome will depend on whether you have childcare facilities at the end of the parental leave, because if at the end of the parental leave you don't have the opportunity to leave your child to in a nursery or to a childminder, then it might be difficult to go back to work. So I think it's very important to look at also the interaction between these two types of policies. So we'll also look at that and the effect on mother well-being. So how are we going to do that? So we're going to use a quasi-experimental variation in Germany. So first, we're going to exploit a reform in 2007 in Germany that have changed the parental leave scheme. So basically, the main there has been two changes. One is that before 2007, the benefit that mother received was a transfer that was the same for every woman. That was mainly 300 euros per month during the maternity leave. While after 2007, it has been based on pre-earnings before childbirth. So meaning that it has increased quite a lot the amount that mother received when they were on parental leave. And the other thing that has been implementing with this reform it has decreased the duration of the parental leave. So before that, it was up to 2 years. And after 2007, it has been reduced to 1 year. Okay, so the idea was to increase incentives for women to go back to work more rapidly after the reform. So we will use this reform in 2007, and we will also use the fact that there has been during the same period a huge increase in childcare facilities in Germany. But this increase in childcare facilities has been very different by lenders, because so each lender was responsible for implementing this increase in terms of childcare facilities. So you have different local differences in terms of childcare expansion. So to look at the effect on life satisfaction, we will use the German socioeconomic panel. And basically what we find is the following. So we find that reducing the duration of parental leave and increasing the benefits that mothers receive during the parental leave has positive and long-run effects on women that are in the middle or the top of the income distribution. Okay, but we find negative but non-significant effect on women that are at the bottom of the earning distribution, that receive lower earning. We also find positive but non-significant effect of the child care expansion on mother well-being. But interestingly, we find that there is an interaction indeed between these two policies, meaning that in region where you had a higher expansion of childcare facilities, women were happier when the parental leave ended, and they could go back to work more easily than in region where you had less childcare facilities. Okay, so briefly on the data and the German context. So as you know, in Germany, there have been low fertility rates since a long time. And so it has been an issue, and now policy makers are trying to implement policy to try to increase this fertility rate. And in particular, one problem in Germany is that a lot of women, once they have children, they don't go back to work, or if they do, most of them work part-time, okay? And if you look at actually the number of people who agree with this statement, a woman should stay home when she has a child under school age. So this is a graph from Cleven and al. So this is why Austria is in red. But you see that Germany, I don't know if you see the name of the country, but Germany is at the right, and you see that you have more than 70% of people who agree with this statement in Germany. So I was really surprised. It's kind of very huge. So it's quite a conservative environment in terms of whether women should work when they have a child. And so, as I said, the parental leave scheme that is implemented now is that when you have a child, you can take a parental leave for up to 1 year, where you receive a benefit that is equal to 67% of your pre-birth earning. So there have been several reforms that have changed this parental leave system during the last 40 years. And so the last reform was, as I said, in 2007. So we will use this reform that reduce the duration for the parental leave and increase the benefit that women receive during this period. Now, in terms of childcare provision, you have limited childcare provision actually in Germany. So on average, at the beginning of like in 2007, you had less than 1/3 of children who had who could attend nurseries. Well, for preschool institutions, so when you have kids that are a bit older, you actually have more, so it's more spread. You have more kids attending this type of institution. Now, so as I said, we're going to use the German socioeconomic panel to look at this. So most of you know this data. So it's longitudinal data. You have information on life satisfaction, labor market outcome, but you also have information on the year of childbirth and also the months when it happens. And you also know where people live, at least in terms of lender. So you can merge this with information at the lender level of, for instance, the number of children that are in nurseries in this lender. So first, a few stylized facts on what happened in terms of life satisfaction when you have a child. So we will first focus on when women have the first child, okay? So the event will be really the first child. You can reproduce all of the results I will show you looking at just when you have a new child, okay? And you basically find kind of the same results, but here I will focus on the first child. And so I just do an event studies exactly as it's done in, for instance, Cleven et al. Study, where you look at the well-being of a woman like 5 years before having the first child and 10 years after having the first child. So we only control for here year fixed effects, lender fixed effects, and age fixed effects. So we have very few control. The idea is that if you want to add other control, it could be that some of them are mechanism, or so you really want to have as less control as possible here. So here is what you get in terms of life satisfaction. So 0 is when you have the birth of the first child. So this is a usual graph. You see that a bit before birth, the childbirth, you have an increase in terms of life satisfaction because people are anticipating maybe the birth of the child, or it's just because happier people tend to have or more likely to have kids. And so then you have a decrease in terms of life satisfaction, and it's become negative, which seems to suggest that there is a child penalty in terms of well-being. So at least. So now, of course, this is an average effect. It could be interesting to look at difference across the population. So if you look at, I use the same definition as Marianne Bertrand in terms of having a career or not having a career. So remember, career is having earnings above the 25th percentile. You see that this child penalty is mainly for women who, as she said, who has a career, but not for women who have low earnings. So it really seems that it's women who are maybe working and having higher earning who are struggling with having kids. Now, you can also look at part-time versus full-time workers. Okay, so mothers who are working part-time and full-time. And again, I mean, it's quite striking. You see that it's mainly mothers who are working full-time that have a decrease in terms of well-being. And the last thing I want to show you is when you look at whether mother or single mother or non-single mother. And okay, sorry, it's the other way around. I mean, there has been a problem with this graph, but it's single mother that have a huge decrease in terms of well-being, while non-single mother, it's a bit, you don't see significant effect, okay? So I think these figures are quite striking to tell that it's indeed mothers who are working full-time and who have a career that are struggling to have a child and a work life. So it could be that parental leave policies and childcare policy could help to reduce this child penalty in terms of life satisfaction. So in terms of parental leave, as I said, I will use reforms in Germany. So you can focus first on 3 reforms. One in 1993 that has increased the parental leave duration up to 2 years, okay? And women were receiving 300 euros per month. It was not depending on the earning they had before childbirth. Then in 2001, there had been some flexibility that has been introduced. So women could choose between 1 year with 450 euros per month or 2 years with 300 euros per month. But actually, when you look at the take-up rate, like most of them choose the 2 years with 300 euros per month. So it was only 15% of women choosing the option 1. And in 2007, so there has been a decrease again in duration. So it was only up to 1 year, with now a replacement rate of the in terms of benefit that was 67% of the pre-birth earnings. Okay, so you had the huge increase in terms of the amount of benefit you receive during parental leave, and a decrease in terms of duration in 2007. In terms of take-up rate, like it's almost 100%. So it means that most women decide to take this parental leave after childbirth, okay? And it's in addition to the 14-week maternity leave you have. Okay, so it's something that is widely used by German women after childbirth. So if you compare what is going on depending on these different parental leave options. So first you can plot the well-being of mothers when they, so for the cohorts, so between 1993 and 2001, okay? So when they had 2 years parental leave and 300 euros per month. So this is what you have. So you see again, this positive effect before and then the negative effect after childbirth, okay? Now, if you plot the well-being of mothers after the 2001 reform, when you had some flexibility introduced, you see nothing really happened. I mean, it's not significant, the difference between the two. Now, if you plot the well-being of mother after the 2007 reform, so where there has been a decrease in terms of parental leave duration and an increase in terms of the amount of benefit that you are receiving, you see that it has increased the well-being of mother, so just after childbirth, but also later on, okay? So, of course, this is just some graphical evidence, but it could be correlated with cohort effects. I mean, we are just comparing the well-being of mother before 2001, between 2001 and 2007, and after 2007. So a lot of things can affect this mother's well-being during this different period. So to use an empirical strategy that will allow us to have an effect that is more closely related to causal effect, we will use the fact that in the 2007 reform, I mean, the amount of benefit that women were receiving or receiving depends on their pre-birth earnings level, okay? And the fact that if you compare the amount of benefit that women were receiving before 2007 and after 2007, so in blue you have the amount of benefit that women were receiving after 2007 depending on their income. And I don't know if there is any question.
No, I think it was just like interference. No.
Okay. And in black here, you have the amount of benefit that women were receiving before 2007, depending on their monthly income. You see that the increase in terms of benefit has been mainly for middle and high earning women, while the difference between before and after 2007 has been much less for the low earning women. Okay, so we are going to exploit this, and so we are going to do a diff strategy where we compare change in well-being for low versus middle and high earning women before and after the reform. Okay, so here in this graph is just show you how the benefit, the parental leave benefit have evolved for women below the 25th percentile of the earning distribution in red, and in blue for women above the 25th percentile of the earning distribution. You see that before 2007, they were receiving quite the same amount of benefit, while after 2007, you had a huge increase in terms of benefit for women above the 25th percentile, while for women below the 25th percentile, it didn't change much in terms of the amount of benefit that they received during parental leave. So we're going to exploit this, okay, this difference between these two groups, and So we are going to, what do? We are going to interact our coefficient of the event studies with a dummy variable that is treated, that is equal to 1 if your earnings were above the 25th percentile, and also a dummy that is post that is equal to 1 if we are after 2007, so after the reform has been implemented. Okay, so it's a usual difference in different strategy, where we looked at before and after the 2007 reform, but compare the effects for women that are below the 25th percentile of the earning distribution with women that are above the 25th percentile of the income distribution. Okay. So here is what you get. So so in red here we have the well-being of mothers that are in the control group. It means women that have earnings that are below the 25th percentile. Okay, and in blue, you have the well-being of mother who are above the 25th percentile of the earning distribution. So it's before the reform, so before 2007. So you see again that this is the same graph as we had before. So women that are that have higher earnings, they tend to be more affected by the birth of a child than women who are in the bottom of the earning distribution. Now, what happened with the reform?
Can I ask a really quick clarification question?
Sorry?
Can I ask a quick clarification question?
Sure.
So I was wondering, why is there this big widening in their life satisfaction before the reform? So it seemed that some of them became more satisfied with their life, or for the other ones there was a drop. Is this something to do with anticipation, or would you explain it?
You mean here what is happening just before the reform, like?
Yeah, like that it seems that the gap is widening. I don't know if that's significant or not, but
yeah, I agree. So it seems indeed that in terms of anticipation, it's not exactly the same. So it seems indeed that for the control group, like women in the bottom of the earning distribution, like they seems to be a bit happier before. But I don't remember if it's significant or not. But I think you will see. I report some coefficient after, at least in yeah. It's not significant before, but 1 year before birth, I guess it might be. It's a good question. I don't know, and I need to think about it. Why?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So here is what you get. So for the treated group after the 2007 reform. So you see that it seems that in terms of well-being, they had, it seems to be happier somehow after the reform. So they had an increase in terms of well-being after the reform, while for the control group, it's actually going in the other direction. It seems that they had a negative effect in terms of well-being after the reform. So of course, here we just look at graphical evidence, but I can now show you what is going on in terms of effects and significance. So you see that, so I just show you some at some different points at -3, 1, 3, 5, and 10, but of course you can also look at the other threshold. So you see again that there is some positive effect after 1 year and after 3 years, and then it's decreasing. And the effect, so treated is when you have an earnings above the 25th percentile. So again, we see with this negative coefficient that those women are experiencing lower level of well-being after having a child than women at the bottom of the distribution. Now, if you look at the interaction with post, that is the reform effect, you see so negative coefficient for the control group, but it's not significant. So in these graphs, it seems that this drop in terms of well-being that we observe for the control group is not significant, while the positive effect for the middle and high earning women seems to be significant. So it seems that with this reform, the women that took advantage of this reform were women with middle and high earning, okay, who had positive effects of this increase in the amount of benefit they received during parental leave, and maybe a shorter duration of the parental leave. So, okay, maybe I will skip that, but you can also have the same kind of results when you do an RDD type of graph, where you look at what happened for mother just before and after 2001, when you use the months of birth of the child for the two group. Okay, now if you try to understand a bit the mechanism, so why women tend to be happier after the reform, so you could have an income effect. As I said, you have an increase in terms of the amount of benefit you receive. There could be a labor supply effect, okay, because the parental leave has been shorter. Women have more incentive to go back to work after 1 year, compared to before, where they had a 2-year parental leave, and so maybe they were out of the labor force for longer, and it might be more difficult to go back to work after that. Or you could imagine that there are some social norm effects, like for instance, if more women are going back to work after 1 year, then maybe it's changing the norms, and it might seem maybe it's less a problem if women are going back to work after childbirth than it was before. So in order to try to dig a bit into this mechanism, I will show you just some tables. So what happened when we control for the amount of maternity benefits that women receive? Does it change the coefficient? And it seems here that basically you have the same results. So it doesn't attenuate the positive effects on life satisfaction. So it seems that it's not that much related to that. So we can also look at what happened in terms of labor force participation.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Christopher was having one question, which probably applies to all of these tables in a way. And he suggested for the first table you showed that whether you sort of like a different binning of these years might actually increase your confidence a little bit, because this is just like for all, these are different years, right? Different event years.
Yeah.
So if you bin them together, you know, in 2 bins, 2-year bins, maybe you can get
it's a good point. It's true. I mean,
Yeah.
I can pull years together and it will increase. It's true that I mean, one of the problem here is that, of course, when you focus only on women that have their first child and you look at the different year before and after birth, you kind of ask a lot to the data. So
yeah,
I agree.
And maybe just when we added, so Jenny Fieve, Jeffrey was also asking whether the policy was announced early enough that there could be selection into fertility.
So it's a good question. So there have been papers looking at that on this reform, and basically what they show is that the reform have been announced few months before January 2007, and women were not able to adjust. And so you don't find any delay in terms of birth or something like that when you look at the fertility rate before and after the reform. So what happened in terms of labor force participation? You see that there has been an increase in terms of labor force participation after the reform. So when you look at this interaction between event and post, and there is no significant difference between the two groups in terms of earnings, meaning that both groups were more likely to go back to work after childbirth, and there is no difference between the control and treatment group. But when you look at part-time versus full-time employment, you see something quite interesting. You see that women that have middle and high earnings, they tend to be more likely to be on part-time job after the reform and after childbirth. Okay, it has increased part-time employment for women with middle and high earnings, while it has decreased a bit part-time employment for women with low earnings. So, I mean, I think it's quite interesting, at least for the middle and high earning women, to understand that because they had to go back to work more rapidly than before, it could be that so they had no choice to go back to work, but if they didn't receive helps in terms of maybe childcare facilities or childminder that could take care of the kids after 1 year, then they had to go back to work, but with part-time job, and they couldn't go back with full-time jobs. So somehow it has increased the probability to be on part-time job after the reform. Now, if you look also in terms of leisure satisfaction, you see an increase in terms of leisure satisfaction for high-earning women. And finally, you see that somehow, I mean, when you look at whether they were more likely to have kids after the reform, so you see no significant effects for the control group, but for the treatment group, there is here this slight positive effect, barely significant, which seems to suggest like that again, this middle and high earning women, they were more satisfied after the reform, and so maybe they were more likely to have another kids after the reforms, at least 5 years after the first child. Okay, so it seems that when you look at this 2007 reform in terms of parental leave, it had positive effect on the middle and high earning mothers. And maybe one of the reasons is that they were more likely to go back to work, but with part-time employment, and it has some suggestive positive effects in terms of fertility, at least 5 years after the first child birth. Okay, so this is what you can get when you look at this parental leave reform. Now, briefly, if you look at childcare facilities, what can you see? Do you see that when you have an increase in terms of childcare facilities, do you see an increase in terms of mother well-being? So to look at this, we have data on, as I said, the number of children in nurseries, so that are aged between 1 and 3, by lender and by year. And so you can compute an index that is, okay, the number of children that you have in nurseries that are aged between 1 and 3 in the lender, divided by the total number of children that are aged between 1 and 3 in the lender. So it's kind of then give you the share of children that are in nurseries in the lender in 1 year. And so if you look at the evolution of this index over time, on average for Germany, you see that there has been a huge increase in terms of nurseries, places in nurseries in Germany during the period. So, for instance, in 2006, it was almost only 15% of children, while in 2019, you see that it reached 35% of children. So you have a quite large childcare expansion during the period. Now, this expansion has been different across the German states. So if you look at the childcare provision in 2006 in the different lenders, you see that it was a bit higher in East Germany than in West Germany in 2006. And then you see that it has increased over time in West Germany. So in 2009, it's a bit higher. 2013, it has increased again. And 2009, okay, you see that we reach almost 30 or 40% in most of the German states. Okay.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Simona is asking whether childcare is for free in Germany.
Oh, it's a good question. I have to check. I think you have to pay something, but it's highly subsidized, no? But maybe Chris, you.
I actually do not know.
You don't know.
right.
But it's a good question. I should check that. But I think so. It's not free. I think you have to pay, but it's highly subsidized. Okay, so here is, if you use this local childcare variation, you can just look at whether mother well-being is higher or lower depending on these childcare facilities, if you are below or above the median. And here you see that basically there is no real difference between the two groups. Now, of course, you can say, but variation in terms of childcare facilities and where you decide to live and your life satisfaction, all of this might be endogenous, meaning that could be that mother decide to live in states where you have higher childcare facilities when they decide to have children. And so, I mean, so one way to deal with that is to look at episodes of large increase in childcare facilities by lender. And somehow the idea is that it could be that maybe you have this large and sudden increase in childcare provision in a single year might be less predictable than, the average childcare facilities that you have in a lender at some point. So this is how papers like, for instance, Cleven et al. In 2021 paper, this is what they are doing, is they try to isolate episodes in the different region where you have a huge increase in terms of childcare facilities. And so it's kind of try to focus on large supply shocks in terms of facilities and compare the well-being of mother in those regions where you have a large increase at some point in terms of childcare facilities versus region where you didn't have this increase in terms of childcare facilities. So I will skip you the graph, but the map, but you see that when you do this and you compare the mother well-being in a region where you had a large increase in terms of childcare facilities, so more than 30% in 1 year, compared to lenders where you have a smaller increase in terms of childcare facilities, well, again, it's not very appealing what you have. You don't find very huge difference in terms of well-being, maybe at the end a bit. So when you look at the coefficient, it's indeed what you find. You don't find any significant difference between the two. Maybe a bit at the end where you have a coefficient that is slightly significant, meaning that it seems that you don't have much difference in terms of well-being between lenders where you have large expansion in terms of childcare facilities versus lenders where you didn't have this childcare expansion. Now, okay, I will skip that. So now, what had happened in terms of interaction effects? Because as I was saying, it could well be that, I mean, at least parental leave effect will depend on these childcare facilities. It could be that childcare facilities on their own don't have a lot of effect on mothers' well-being, but at least it could be that when parental leave ends and so you have to go back to work, it's better to live in a region or in a lender where you have childcare facilities than in lenders where you don't have the possibility to leave your child to a nursery.
Sarah, just quickly, we only have like 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
If we can have like 3 minutes at the end for discussion.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, I will just show you the results for that and then I'm done. So again, what we can do is that we can use this event studies approach, but you can look at the interaction between post-reform, before and after the reform in 2007, and whether you were living in lenders where you have a huge increase in terms of childcare facilities versus no increase in terms of childcare facilities. And so this is what you get. So here is what happens. So before and after the reform, where you were living in lenders with an expansion in terms of childcare facilities. So you see that mother well-being has increased after the reform when you had childcare facilities. Okay, so it seems that you have an increase in terms of well-being of this parental leave reform in lenders where you had childcare facilities. While when you look at before and after the 2007 reform, in the control group, meaning that in region where you didn't have a lot of childcare facilities, you don't see any effect of the reform on mother well-being. Now, if you look at the coefficients, again, it's barely significant. But you see again that you had this somehow positive interaction effect, at least at the beginning in the short run, where so it's related to this idea that when the parental leave finished, when you didn't have this parental leave anymore, and you had to go back to work, mother had to go back to work, it was better in terms of well-being if you were living in a region where you had higher childcare facilities, higher share of childcare facilities, than in region where there were less childcare facilities. Okay, I'm done with that. So conclusion, I think I don't have to repeat everything. I just want to, so I had some results also on fathers, but maybe I can go back to this result after if we have time, but happy to have question and answer questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Really, really interesting. I think Richard had his hand up for already like 2 minutes. Richard.
We don't hear you.
Still muted.
Sarah, I was trying to relate what you found in this German case to your original graph, which seemed to be saying that career women are less happy than non-career women or mothers. So here you're saying that these reforms increased employment, which is, as it were, put more people into careers, but also that made them happier. So are you thinking of it as a falsification of the original Marianne Bertrand analysis? Second question, what can be said about the effect of these reforms on whether people become mothers at all, and how that affects overall well-being? Because if it does, obviously you should be including the effects on all women, not just on people who in the particular circumstances are mothers.
Yeah, so a good question. So I will start with the second one. So there have been actually a paper looking at the effect of this parental leave reform on fertility. And she finds, so Anna Roth find that you have an increase in terms of fertility. So women are more likely to have children after the reform, and in particular for middle and high earning women. So you're right, I think it's a good idea to look at also what happens for the well-being of women who are not mother, or I mean, to look at the overall effect in terms of well-being. And to regarding your first question, I think, I mean, I was kind of asking myself the same thing. So how to relate this result with Marianne Bertrand and what we show at the beginning. And I think the idea is there are two things, that women seems to be happier because they go back to work. But actually, when you look at the number of hours of work in full-time versus part-time, it seems that they go back to part-time employment. And if you remember at the beginning of the seminar, I was showing a graph where you see that actually part-time mother are happier than full-time mother. So it could be that you have this positive effect of the reform because you have this increase in terms of part-time employment. I think the other reason I'm suspecting, in this is something I think we should look deeper, is that you can have a social norm effect, meaning that because you have more women going back to work, okay, you have less of a stigma to go back to work. And so somehow it can increase the well-being of mothers that are working compared to before the reform.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Lots of compliments in the chat. You look at I mean, there have been so many reforms apparently, which you showed at the beginning, and you picked 2007 particularly, and that's why, because this is sort of the most recent expansion, which is probably most relevant, and the other ones were very different, or?
Well, for different reasons, yeah. First, because I think it has a quite huge, it was a huge change in terms of parental leave reform. Also because in terms of identification strategy, then you can have this control and treatment group and not, I mean, because for the other reform, you could only do a before and after reform. So, I mean, it's less good in terms of identification strategy. And the other reason is that usually in the literature, when people look at this type of reform, they do regression discontinuity analysis, where you kind of looked at just before and after the reform, the month before and the month after. But here with the German data, I mean, you would have very few people doing that, so it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Andrew, I think, is next.
Oh, I know we're out of time. There are two types of effects in empirical economics: too small to be interesting and too large to be believable. So this is a very large effect on treated women. I think to put this into context, we need to know how much these policies cost to the government. Was this a good use of budgets, or would we have done better investing in education or unemployment benefits or something like that? That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, it's a good point. Indeed, so I think in terms of cost, I don't have the figure in mind, but I would say I guess it was huge costs, because in terms of the benefits women were receiving after the reform, it has increased quite a lot. So, but it's a good point. I mean, we can compute a benefit cost ratio in terms of how many euros have been spent to increase mother well-being or something like that.
Yeah, they can probably be looked up in sort of like budget changes.
Yeah.
In the federal budget, I think. That's a very good point. Any other questions? I think we're over time, and if there's nobody else, then yeah, thank you so much, Sarah, for coming over and presenting. It was a pleasure, and yeah, we will upload the video and the recording probably next week. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming. And next week we have Anthony Lepinter from the University of Luxembourg, who will be talking about wealth, assets, and life satisfaction, and how to estimate a causal effect of assets on life satisfaction using a metadata instrument, the variable approach. So very much looking forward to that, and hope to see many of you then. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye. Thanks a lot. Thank you all.